In the small village of Obodo, nestled between the rolling hills and the sparkling waters of the river Niger, a legend had long been whispered about of a mysterious and alluring creature. She was said to be a mermaid, with shimmering scales and flowing locks of golden hair, who would often disguise herself as a beautiful lady to lure cruel men to their doom. The villagers believed that the mermaid's lair was hidden deep within the nearby river caves, where the water was said to be treacherous and the currents strong. Few dared to venture near the caves, fearing the mermaid's wrath and the dangers that lurked beneath the waves. But there was one man in the village who did not believe in the legend of the mermaid. His name was Ikena, a cruel and heartless man who treated his wife, Nnena, with contempt and disdain. Ikena laughed at the stories of the mermaid, calling them mere fantasy and old wives' tales. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Ikena decided to take a walk along the riverbank. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and the sound of the river flowing gently. As he strolled along the bank, he noticed a figure in the distance, walking towards him. As the figure drew closer, Ikena's eyes widened in surprise. Before him stood a beautiful woman, with long golden hair and piercing green eyes. Her skin was smooth and unblemished, and her curves were tantalizing. Ikena was immediately smitten, and he approached the woman with a charming smile. "Good evening, my lovely," Ikena said, bowing low. "What brings you to our humble village?" The woman smiled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I am just a traveler, seeking refuge from the world," she said, her voice husky and seductive. "And you, sir, are a most handsome and charming man. I am drawn to you, like a moth to flame." Ikena's heart skipped a beat as the woman's words sent shivers down his spine. He was used to women fawning over him, but there was something about this woman that was different. Something that drew him in, like a siren's call. As the night wore on, Ikena found himself becoming more and more entranced by the woman. They walked along the riverbank, talking and laughing, and Ikena felt himself falling deeper and deeper under her spell. But as the hours passed, Ikena began to notice something strange. The woman seemed to be avoiding the village, steering him instead towards the river caves. And as they worked, the air grew colder and the shadows seemed to deepen. Suddenly, Ikena heard a faint singing in his ears. The song was haunting and beautiful, but it sent shivers down his spine. He turned to the woman, but she was no longer beside him. Instead, he saw a shimmering tail fluke disappearing into the darkness of the river caves. Ikena's heart skipped a beat as he realized the truth. The woman was not a woman at all, but a mermaid, luring him to his doom with her enchanting voice and beauty. Ikena tried to run, but his feet seemed rooted to the spot. The mermaid's song grew louder, more insistent, and he felt himself being drawn towards the river caves, helpless to resist. As he stumbled forward, the mermaid's tail fluke reappeared, and she reached out with a shimmering hand to claim him. Ikena screamed, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the river and the mermaid's haunting song. The next morning, the villagers found Ikena's body washed up on the riverbank, his eyes frozen in terror. They knew at once that the mermaid had claimed another victim, and they whispered among themselves of the dangers of the river caves and the allure of the mermaid's deadly song. But the villagers also knew that the mermaid was not just a mindless killer. She was a guardian, a protector of the innocent and a punisher of the guilty. And they knew that Ikena's cruel treatment of his wife, Nnena, had sealed his fate. As the days passed, The villagers noticed that the mermaid's song seemed to be growing stronger, more insistent. And they knew that she was still out there, waiting for her next victim. The mermaid's next victim was a man named Uche, who had a reputation for being cruel to his wife, Amaka. Uche had always laughed at the stories of the mermaid, calling them mere fantasy and old wives' tales. But one fateful evening, as he was walking along the riverbank, he heard the mermaid's song. It was haunting and beautiful, and it seemed to be calling to him. Uche's eyes widened as he heard the mermaid's song. It was like nothing he had ever heard before, haunting, beautiful, and utterly captivating. He felt himself being drawn towards the sound, his feet moving of their own accord. As he worked, the song grew louder, more insistent. Uche felt his heart pounding in his chest, his senses reeling. He stumbled and fell, skinning his knee on the rough stone. But he didn't feel any pain. He was too busy listening to the song, which seemed to be weaving a spell around him. Uche felt himself being lifted off the ground, his body floating towards the river. And then, he saw her. The mermaid. She was even more beautiful than he had imagined, with shimmering scales and flowing locks of golden hair. She reached out a hand and touched his face, and Uche felt a jolt of electricity run through his body. The mermaid began to sing again, her voice weaving a spell around Uche. He felt himself being drawn into the river, the water closing over his head like a shroud. But he didn't feel any fear. He was too busy listening to the song, which seemed to be telling him a story. A story of love and loss, of betrayal and revenge. Uche felt himself being transported to a different time and place, where he saw the mermaid as a young woman, living in a small village on the riverbank. He saw her fall in love with a young man, and he saw the joy and happiness that they shared. But he also saw the tragedy that befell them. The young man was killed in a brutal attack by a rival village, and the mermaid was left alone, her heart broken. Uche felt a pang of sorrow as he watched the mermaid's story unfold. He realized that she was not just a monster, but a complex and multifaceted being, driven by a desire for revenge against the men who had wronged her. As the song came to an end, Uche felt himself being pulled back into the present. He found himself floating in the river, the mermaid's face inches from his own. And then, everything went black. The next morning, the villagers found Uche's body washed up on the riverbank, his eyes frozen in a look of wonder. They knew at once that the mermaid had claimed another victim, but they also knew that Uche's story was different from Ikena's. Uche's wife, Amaka, was devastated by his death, but she also felt a sense of relief. She had been trapped in a loveless marriage with Uche, and she knew that she was better off without him. As the days passed, the villagers began to realize that the mermaid was not just a mindless killer. She was a guardian, a protector of the innocent and a punisher of the guilty. And they knew that she would continue to sing her song, luring men to their doom, until justice was served. But the mermaid's next victim would be different from the others. His name was Obina, and he was a kind and gentle soul, loved by all who knew him. Obina was not a cruel man, but he had been working secretly with a group of fishermen who had been polluting the river and destroying the mermaid's home. The mermaid decided to punish him after discovering his cruel behavior. After killing Obina, the mermaid's song seemed to grow louder, more haunting. The villagers were filled with grief and anger, and they demanded justice for Obina's death. "How could she do this to us?" one of the villagers cried. "Obina was a good man," kind and gentle. He didn't deserve to die. The villagers began to hunt the mermaid, determined to make her pay for what she had done. They searched the river and the surrounding caves, but she seemed to be always one step ahead. As they hunted, the mermaid began to toy with them. She would appear and disappear, luring them deeper into the river with her enchanting song. The villagers were entranced, unable to resist the mermaid's call. They followed her deeper into the river, until they were trapped in the strong currents. One by one, the villagers began to disappear, pulled down into the depths of the river by the mermaid's magic. The others tried to escape, but it was too late. The mermaid's song grew louder, more triumphant, as she trapped the villagers in the river. They were at her mercy, unable to escape. And as they struggled to stay afloat, the mermaid began to sing a new song, one of revenge and triumph. The villagers knew they were doomed, trapped in the river by the mermaid's magic. The mermaid's song echoed through the river, a haunting melody that seemed to come from all directions at once. The villagers were entranced, unable to move or escape. And as they listened to the mermaid's song, they knew they would never be seen again. They were trapped in the river, at the mercy of the mermaid's magic. As the mermaid's song reached its climax, the villagers felt themselves being pulled deeper into the river. They were trapped, unable to escape the mermaid's magic. Just as all hope seemed lost, a figure appeared from nowhere. He was a tall, dark-haired man with piercing blue eyes. He wore a long, flowing cloak that seemed to billow behind him like a cloud. The man raised his hand, and the mermaid's song was suddenly silenced. The villagers felt the magic that had held them captive begin to dissipate, and they were able to swim to the surface of the river. As they emerged from the water, gasping for air, they saw the man standing on the riverbank. He was watching them with an intense gaze, his eyes seeming to bore into their very souls. "Who are you?" one of the villagers asked, still trying to catch their breath. The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned to face the mermaid, who was still lurking in the depths of the river. The villagers could see the anger and hatred in her eyes, and they knew that she was not going to give up easily. The man raised his hand again, and the mermaid let out a scream of rage. The villagers felt the ground begin to shake, and they knew that the mermaid was summoning all her power to attack. But the man was not afraid. He stood tall, his eyes flashing with a fierce inner light. The villagers could see that he was not like any ordinary man. He was powerful, magical, and utterly mysterious. As the mermaid's attack reached its climax, the man raised his hand once more. The villagers felt a blast of energy emanate from him, and the mermaid's magic was suddenly deflected. The mermaid let out a scream of rage and frustration, and the villagers knew that she had been defeated. But as they turned to thank the man, they saw that he had vanished into thin air. The villagers were left standing alone on the riverbank, wondering what had just happened. Who was the mysterious man who had saved them? And what was the secret of his incredible power? As they stood there, trying to make sense of it all, they heard a faint whispering in their ears. It was the mermaid's voice, and she was saying something that made their blood run cold. "He is not what he seems," she whispered. "He is the one who has been awakened. And soon, he will come for you all." That's the end of episode 1. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads, including episode 2, which will be coming your way next week. Thank you for watching, And we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.